Welcome to the Maths Guy, everybody. Today we're going to be looking at our first lesson covering everything you need to know about Year 6 Maths. Today we're going to focus on place value, which is the first unit of any curriculum. If we master this, we are on a very solid foundation for everything else you need to know coming up in later series. So what are we going to cover? Well, we're going to cover how to compare and order large numbers. Then we're going to look at how to round decimals to whole numbers, before learning how to round to one decimal place. And then we're going to look at how to add and subtract negative numbers. Finally, in this lesson, we're going to look at how to multiply and divide by 10, 100, and 1,000 using the place value chart. If we master all of these things, guys, we are going to have a really good understanding leading us into our next lessons. So let's waste no time and let's jump into the first lesson, how to order and compare large numbers. Okay, so we're going to start by ordering this set of numbers here. And we're going to follow these steps that we've got written across the top. And the first step says to label our numbers. And then step 2 says compare from the largest value first, or the highest value first. So step 1 says label your numbers. Well, what does that mean? Well, every number sits in a place value column. In this case, starting with our ones, then our tens, our hundreds, then we have thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, and we actually have millions as well. And understanding that is going to get us most of the way through this lesson. The other thing that's really important is to understand that the further that our numbers go to the left, the greater the value of that column. Tens are bigger than ones, hundreds are bigger than tens, thousands are bigger than hundreds, and so on and so on. Therefore, for example, everything in this millions column obviously has a much bigger value than everything in the ones column. So even though in this case we have a 2 in each column, they do not hold the same value. This 2 in the ones column is simply a 2, whereas the 2 in the millions column holds the value of 2 million, much greater. So now we can look at step 2, which says to compare from the highest value first. And as we discussed, everything over on this left hand side has the highest value. So in this case, our highest value is actually on the millions column. And as today we are looking from the smallest to the largest, which we call the ascending order. The opposite from largest to smallest is the descending order. So this is the ascending order, and because we're looking for the smallest, I'm looking for the smallest value in this millions column. Well, I have a 2, a 2, a 3, a 3, and a 4. So obviously my two 2s are the smallest value. But which of these first two numbers is the smallest? Well, we both have a 2 in the millions column, so I need to look at my hundreds, thousands, and we actually both have a 4. Look in my 10,000s, we both have a 5. Look in my thousands, both have a 2. Look in my hundreds, they both have a 9. But look, now in my tens column, I can see I have a 4 and a 3. And remember, I'm looking for the smallest value, so therefore this 3 holds a smaller value than the 4. So it doesn't matter what goes on now in my ones column, we know automatically that this number here must be smaller. So my smallest number out of this set is 2,452,932. And now I know as well that this must be my second smallest number, because remember they were the only ones that had 2 in the million column. So my next smallest would be 2,452,942, and I can cross these two numbers off. Now I'm looking for the next number, the next smallest, so I'll start back at my millions column, and I can see I have 3s and 4, so I'm interested in these 3s. I'll look at their hundreds, thousands, and I can see we have a 5 and a 5, a 7 and a 7, but now I have a 4 and a 3. So again, which one has the smallest value? Well, it's going to be this 3. And like we said before, it now doesn't matter what's happening after this 3 in the hundreds, tens and ones columns, because this 3 will automatically make it smaller than the 4, because this set of numbers can only ever get up to 3,999, whereas this set of numbers will start at 4,000, which will be larger. So my next smallest number will be this one just here, which is 3,573,932. And again, just like before, now I know that this one must be my next smallest at 3,574,532. And that only leaves me one last one, which is 4,113,932. And now a good tip, now that we've organised them, is just to double check by just looking at our numbers in this sequence and just check that we know that they are in the right order. And in this case, yes, they are. Okay, so that's ordering numbers. Now let's have a look at comparing numbers. So I've got these two numbers here that I want to compare. And at the minute I've got this versus sign here, but I'm going to replace that with my comparison signs in a minute, which are greater than, less than, or equal to. And I'm going to decide which one of these is going to slot into that versus position. So remember the first step, label the numbers. So I'm going to do that now. Boom, there we go. And now all I'm going to do is follow step 2, which says compare from the highest value first. I'm going to look at the first column, the millions columns, and I can see that we both have a 2. So that doesn't help us. But straight away, in the hundred thousands column, I can see a 3 and I can see a 4. Which one has the greater value? So in order to compare them, I'm going to decide which one is larger, which one is smaller. And obviously the 3 has a smaller value. So again, it doesn't matter what happens after the 3, this number will always be smaller than this number because the 4 has a greater value in the hundred thousands column. Therefore, my versus sign here is going to be swapped to a less than symbol. 2,352,932 is less than 2,452,942. And there we go. That is everything you need to know about ordering and comparing numbers. Let's have a last think about what to remember. First, we're going to label our numbers. This is really going to help us make sure we understand what number is in what value column. Then we're going to begin to compare, starting with the largest value. And remember that ascending means that our numbers get bigger, and descending means that our numbers get smaller. Okay, here's a little set for you to order. Put them from smallest to largest. If you want to, you can put the answers into the comment section. I'm going to try and mark every single one. Press pause on the video now. Good luck. Okay, so that's good. We've mastered that. Let's now look at how to round to a whole number. Let's go. So the thing we're going to look at and remember today is that we need to find the digit we're rounding to and then look next door to help us round. So because today we are looking at rounding to the nearest whole number, we are going to be rounding to the nearest number after the decimal on the left hand side here. So we know our starting position, and all we're going to do is look next door to help us understand how to round. And the trick is today we're not going to get confused with the digits that are not relevant to us. So let's start with this first green chili example, and I'm rounding to the nearest whole number, and in this case my whole number at the moment is 0, and then all I'm going to do is look next door where I can see this 4 and use the 4 to help me understand if I'm going to be rounding down to the 0 or up to a 1, because what I need to understand is 0.41 sits somewhere between two whole numbers, and the first whole number is 0 and the second whole number would be 1. 0.41 sits somewhere on that line. What I'm trying to do is work out whether it's closer to my 0 or closer to my 1. And the number next door is going to be what's going to help us do that. And our rule that we have is if it's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I'm going to round up all the time, or 4, 3, 2, 1, or 0. I'm going to keep things as they are. So because in this case I have a 4, I can see 4 down here on my line suggests that I'm going to be rounding down, which means that the 4 is closer to 0 than it would have been to 1. Therefore, when I'm rounding this, I'm going to keep my 0 as it is, and my whole number is just 0. Now let's look at this second example, and I have 2.46. So 2.46 must sit somewhere between 2 and 3. So if this was on my number line, I have 2 and 3, and 2.46 would be somewhere here, I guess. But again, all I have to do when I'm rounding it to a whole number is look at the whole number, look next door, look for what that number is, and I can see it's a 4 again. 4 again is on my number line just here, indicating that I'm going down. So when I'm rounding, I'm going to be bringing 2.46 to the whole number 2. So in this case, my whole number would be just 2. Now let's ramp things up and look at an orange chili challenge. I have 45.2. So let's look at our whole number. We have 45. So 45.2 must sit somewhere between 45 and 46. So I put my number line in place. 45.2, I'm going to guess is over here. Just logic tells me that. But to use my scientific inquiry, I'm going to be looking at the whole number and then look next door, We have a 2. 2 is also down on the rounding down section, so my 45.2 is closer to 45. Now this one looks a little bit harder because we have lots of digits after the decimal, but let's not be confused. We only need to look at my whole number, which is a 5, and look next door, which is a 0. So 5.022 needs to sit somewhere between 5 and 6. They're my two whole numbers. Where's it going to sit? Well, I'm looking at the 0. I can see that just here. Indicates rounding down. And if you think about it, 5.022 would be very close to 5. So it makes sense to round down to a 5. 17.724 needs to sit somewhere between 17 and 18. Where's it going to sit? Well, let's look at the whole number. I have 17. Look next door, I have a 7 this time. My 7 indicates I'm going to be rounding up. So 7.724 would probably be somewhere around here on my number line, and actually rounding up to 18. So for the first time, I've rounded up, and my 17.724 becomes 18 as a whole number. And last but not least, 56.74. Let's not even use a number line for this one. 56.74. My whole number is 56. Number next door is a 7. There it is on my number line. So therefore, 56.74 becomes 57. Easy. Now it's your turn. Can you have a go at rounding these decimal numbers to a whole number? Use the same logic we just did. Follow the steps. Good luck. Okay, now we've learned how to round to a whole number. Now let's look at how to round to one decimal place. Let's go. Okay, so we have these 4 questions here, but our first job is to actually understand where is our tenth. Well, if we're thinking about place value and we look at this first number, this 6 would be in our ones column. We'd obviously have the decimal point, and then the 8 is the tenths, and the 7 is in the hundredths column. So this number actually reads 6 and 87 hundredths. But we're today rounding to the nearest tenths, so we're going to be focusing on the number in the tenths column, and we're going to be using the number next door to help us decide if we're going to be rounding up or if we're going to be leaving the number as it is. But let's start with our steps. And the first step says to underline our tenths. Well, we just did that. So we've underlined our 8. Then we're going to look next door. And when I say next door, I mean to the right. So we're going to look next door and we're going to see this 7. And the 7 is what's going to decide whether we round this 8 up or keep it as an 8. But how do we know how to do that? Well, we have a little saying. 5 or more, let it soar. Which means round it up to the next number. 4 or less, let it rest. Keep it as the number it is. So I'm going to quickly put my numbers in place. Okay, good. And now looking at this 7 that we saw next door, I can see that it's here, which would be greater than 5. So therefore, 5 or more, let it soar. So I'm going to round this 8 up to a 9. And my answer would become 6.9. The 7 made our 8 become a 9. Okay, question 2 looks a little bit more complicated because we have more digits after our decimal, but they're not going to affect us. We only have to look at the tenths column and look next door. So we're going to follow the exact same steps. Here we go. Underline the tenths value and then look next door. This time we have a 2. Where's our 2? Here it is. 4 or less, let it rest. So I'm going to let it rest. And I'm going to keep my 0 as a 0. So the answer to question 2 is just 8.0. The 2 wasn't big enough to justify bumping it up to an 8.1. Okay, question 3. Again, more digits in my number, but it's not going to confuse us because we only have to look at the tenths column and look next door. So again, following step 1, underline the tenths. In this case, we have a 7. And then look next door. I look next door and I have a 5. Where does 5 sit? It's here. And remember our rhyme, 5 or more, let it soar. 4 or less, let it rest. So 5 or more, we're going to let it soar, and my number becomes 578.8. The 7 has been bumped up to an 8 thanks to the 5. Last one, a little bit challenging, could be confusing because we have a 0 in the ones column, but do we look at that column? No, we just look at the tenths column and next door. So here we go, underline the tenths, in this case it's a 7. Look next door, we have a 3. 4 or less, let it rest. Well, 3 is less than 4, So I'm going to let it rest, and my answer becomes 0.7. And there we go. It is as simple as that. Let's have a look at the things to remember. First, we're going to underline the number in the 10th column. Then we're going to look next door, which will be the hundreds column, and decide if we're going to round it up or leave it. We're going to use our rhyme. You might have a different rhyme, but my rhyme is 5 or more, let it soar, 4 or less, let it rest. And then we just write down the whole number and the tenths. Okay, here we go. 4 questions for you to work on. Put your answers into the comments section. I'm going to try and mark them all. Okay, let's turn up the heat a little bit. Let's have a look at adding negative numbers. This is a really tricky little skill. Let's see if we can get our head around this. Okay, in today's lesson we're going to use a number line. So I've got this number line here at the bottom just to illustrate exactly what we're doing. And we're going to follow these 2 rules. The first one says adding a positive number means we must go up the number line, meaning we're going to get a greater value. And the rule 2 says adding a negative number means we go down the number line, meaning our value gets less. So let's have a look at what that looks like with example 1. So example 1 says -6 plus 11. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to mark -6 on our number line, and I can see it just here. So that's going to be our starting position. And now I'm adding a positive 11. So if I have -6 and I add a positive to it, I'm going to end up coming up my number line. So let's do it. Let's make our 11 jumps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And we land on 5. So -6 plus 11 equals 5. Question 1, not too challenging. Let's have a look at question 2. This is a bit harder. We have 9 plus a negative number this time. So remember, rule 2 said if we add a negative number, we're going to end up coming down our number line. So first things first, I'm going to mark my 9 on my number line. Here it is. And I'm now going to come 11 jumps back down my number line. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And I land on -2. Therefore, 9 plus a -11 leaves us with -2. Now that might be the first one that throws us off a little bit, but the way to think of it is we originally had 9, and then someone gave me, they added a -11. So I had 9, and then someone gave me a -11. So essentially they gave me a debt. I now owed them -11, and I only had 9. So I gave them all my 9, and then I still owe them -2. Okay, let's look at question 3. Question 3 says -3 add -5. So we're going to follow the same steps. I'm going to circle my -3 on the number line. There it is. And I'm adding another negative, and I'm adding -5. So remember rule 2, if I add a negative, I have to come down my number line. Because again, I had -3, I was already owing someone 3, and then someone added another -5, another owing 5. So let's see how much I owe. -3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, added a -5, leaves me with -8. Let's do one more. This one I'm starting with -1, and I'm adding a -4. So -1, circle it on my number line, and then I add another debt, another O. So I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, and I land on -5. And there we go. That is adding positive and negative numbers. Let's think about what to remember. First, we need to draw a number line to help us. Then we're going to put the first number on the line, and then we're going to remember our 2 rules. Adding a positive number means we go up the number line. Adding a negative number means we will come down the number line. Okay, here are 4 questions for you to have a go at. Try and work out the answers to these 4 questions and put your answers into the comment section. Okay, now we've learned how to add. Let's look at the inverse and let's look at how to subtract. Let's go. Okay, we're going to look at these 4 questions here today, and we're also going to use this number line to help us visualize exactly what we are doing. And we're going to follow these 2 rules. First one says subtracting a positive number means we go down the number line. That makes sense, doesn't it? If we subtract a normal positive number, we will go down the number line. But then it says subtracting a negative number means we will go up the number line. And that's what's going to be a little bit confusing to understand today. So let's have a look at question 1. Question 1 says 6 subtract a negative 4. So let's have a look at our number line then. We're starting at 6 down here and we are subtracting a negative 4. Now when we subtract a negative, as it says on this second rule, we have to go up the number line. But why? Well, think of it like this. We had 6 and we also had a negative 4, a debt of 4. But then fortunately, that debt was taken away by subtracting the negative 4. So therefore, I'm going to actually add 4 to my 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, leave me with 10. So 6 subtract a negative 4 equals 10. Let's have a look at question 2. And this time we're starting at negative 9. Find that on the number line, there it is. And this time I am subtracting a negative 2. Now if I was adding a negative 2, I would come 1, 2 down my number line, because that would be adding more debt. But this time I'm taking away some debt, so therefore I come up the number line 1, 2, and I land at negative 7. So negative 9 subtract a negative 2 leaves me with negative 7. Again, following that rule, subtracting a negative number means we go up the number line. Let's have a look at question 3. Question 3 says I have negative 3 and I am subtracting 5. So I'm on negative 3 and I am subtracting, this time, a positive number. So we follow the first rule. Subtracting a positive number means we go down the number line, because essentially all I'm doing is subtracting another 5. So I'm at negative 3, subtract 5 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, leaves me on negative 8. So negative 3 minus 5 is negative 8. Last one, negative 8, subtract negative 4. So let's find negative 8 on the number line, there it is. And if I subtract a negative, I actually come up the number line, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I land on negative 4. So negative 8 subtract a negative 4 is negative 4. Whoa, pretty tricky, right? A little bit confusing to think about. But basically, if we are subtracting a negative number, we actually end up adding. So let's think about things to remember in this lesson. First, draw a number line to help you. This will help you visualize what exactly you're doing. Then put the first number on the line before following the rule for the second number. And the rules are subtracting a positive number means we go down the number line, and subtracting a negative number means we go up the number line. Here are 4 questions for you to have a go at. Work these questions out, put your answers in the comment section. I'm going to mark them all. Okay, this is our final part of the lesson. Let's look at how to multiply decimals by 10, 100 and 1000 using the place value chart. Let's go. So what does it mean to multiply by 10, 100 and 1000, and why are we grouping this into one lesson? Well, the reason we do that is because these are a special set of numbers that are actually quite easy to multiply and divide, so therefore learning a little trick or a method to do this is going to be very, very helpful. So what is that method? Well, we're going to use the place value chart. I've got one here for us. We can see our ones, our tens, our hundreds and our thousands. We've actually got things below the decimal as well. This is our decimal line, and then we have tenths, 100ths and 1000ths. So how can this help us? Well, let's take our first question here, the 56 times 10. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to put our 56 into our place value chart, really focusing on the value of these digits. So in 56, I know that I have 6 ones. So I'll put my 6 in the ones column, and I know that I have 5 tens, so I'll put the 5 in the tens column. Now, when I multiply it by 10, what I'm actually doing is making this number 10 times larger. So to show that, I can just move it one place up this place value chart. And by doing that, I'm making this number 10 times larger. Let me show you what I mean. If I move this 5 into this column, and I move the 6 into the tens column, then I end up with 5 hundreds, 6 tens, and although there's nothing in my ones right now, I would have to fill it with what we call a placeholder or a 0. And now my answer, says 560, and 560 is 10 times larger than 56. That's quite easy to see. So my answer to 56 times 10 is 560. Okay, let's see if this can help us with our division question. So now I have 530, and I'm going to put that into my place value chart again. 530 has 0 ones, 3 tens, and 5 hundreds. And this time I'm dividing it. And when we divide something, our number is obviously going to be getting smaller. So this time we're going to move down our place value chart or to the right. And if I'm dividing it by 10, what I'm actually doing to this number is making it 10 times smaller. So here we go. I'm just going to move them one place to the right this time. So now this 0 will come into this column, into the tenths. The 3 will go into the ones column. The 5 will go into the tens column. And I'm nearly finished. The only thing I need to make sure I do is put my decimal in place, because remember this line here represents our decimal place. So my answer is actually now into the decimals, and I've got 53.0. Now anybody that understands number will understand that we actually now don't need to include this 0.0 in our answer. I can simply write 530 divided by 10 equals 53. Because this 0 doesn't change the value of my number at all. I could have a 0 here, 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 all down my place value chart, and it's not going to change the value of my number. Okay, let's turn things up a little bit. Let's get an orange chili challenge. I'm looking at 23 times 100, and I'm going to put my 23 in place just like before, but this time I'm multiplying by 100. And when I do that, I now need to make our number 100 times larger than what it is. So to do that, I'm going to move it not just one place up our place value chart, but 2 places. And I can see that because I have 1, 2 zeros in my 100. So to make it 100 times larger, here we go, let's move them 1, 2 places. So my 2 moves 1, 2 into the thousands column, and my 3 also moves 1, 2 into my hundreds column. Now remember, we've got some blank spaces here before my decimal, so now I need to fill them with placeholders or zeros. Show me that the answer to 23 times 100 equals 2,300, because 2,300 is 100 times larger than 23. Okay, so let's look at our division question. 453 divided by 100. But now I'm dividing, so remember, I'm going to be going down the place value chart to the right. How many times am I going to go to the right? Well, I'm dividing by 100. I need to make it 100 times smaller, so I'm going to move it 1, 2 places, which will make it 100 times smaller. So here we go. I move my 3, 1, 2, I move my 5, 1, 2 into the tenths column, and I move my 4, 1, 2, landing in the ones column. Don't forget to put that decimal, that's super important. 453 divided by 100 leaves me with 4.53, or 4 and 53 100ths. Let's get to that real spicy challenge. Here we go. 87 times 1000. So same rule applies. I'm going to put my 87 in place, but now I'm multiplying by 1000. So how many places am I going to move it to my left? Because remember, when we're multiplying, we move it to the left because we're getting bigger along our place value chart. Well, I'm going to look at my 1000. I can see I've got 1, 2, 3 zeros. So therefore, I'm going to move it 3 places to my left, making it 1,000 times bigger. So here we go. 8 moves 1, 2, 3, I'm coming actually out of my place value chart that I've made, but that's okay because the place value chart can go on forever, and this column here represents 10 thousands. Okay, so my 8 lands in here. I'm going to do the same thing to my 7. 1, 2, 3, and now I have these 3 gaps before my decimal that I now need to fill with placeholders. 1, 2, 3. So my answer to 87 times 1000 equals 87,000 and no decimals. Okay, let's do my last division question. Here we go. And this time I'm dividing, so I need to come down my place value chart because remember, division questions will end up with a smaller answer. I'm dividing by 1000 again, so I have 1, 2, 3 zeros to consider. So I'm going to move them 3 places down my place value chart. But I can see here that I can put my decimal in place, and I have a couple of options. I can call this number 0.421 or I can put a 0 here and call it 0.421. Exactly the same value, just a slightly different way of saying it. So I'm going to keep my 0 and I'm going to say 421 divided by 1,000 equals 0.421 or 0.421 thousandths. Okay, there you go. That is everything you need to know about multiplying and dividing by 10, 100 and 1,000. But let's just look at what to remember. First, we should always make a place value chart, then write the numbers in the chart focusing on the value of each of the digits, then move the numbers to the left if we're multiplying, or to the right if we're dividing. And then we simply look at what we're multiplying and dividing by, 10, 100 and 1,000, see how many zeros are in that number, and then move the numbers that amount of times. Okay, so now it's your turn. Press pause on the video, have a go at answering these questions again for yourselves. If you need a little bit of help, you can go back and see how I did it in the video, but try and do it on your own. Put the answers in the comment section. Okay, there we go. You've mastered the place value element of your year 6 lessons. Hopefully this was understandable. If it wasn't, go back and watch little bits again until you have a solid understanding. If you do have a solid understanding, check out the next lesson in this series, which is going to be covering everything you need to know about addition and subtraction for year 6. But for now, guys, I'm going to see you in another video. Peace out.